Hello, everybody. It is 9 o'clock Eastern Time on Saturday night. My name is Chris Weuve, and this is Starfleet Tactical. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. It's been a few weeks since we've done a show because I've been running all over the place and doing things. And at one point I was sick, but I think I was already scheduled to not do a show. I ended up not going to some places that I planned on going to because I had caught the plague. And I decided not to give it to the friend of mine who is immunocompromised. So, but I ended up not doing a show anyway, just because I had the plague and I decided to take it off. So in any event, tonight we're going to talk about Michael McCollum's Antares Trilogy series. It's sort of a follow-on to the last show. So basically, okay. So this is one of my BuNine shirts. It's left over from when BuNine was sort of more of an ongoing concern than it is now. I've got two of them. The other one is black, and so I'll probably wear that one next week. So nothing pithy or funny on this shirt. It's just a BuNine symbol, but we had these made up and we'd wear them at cons and stuff like that. It is a rare instance of me wearing a shirt that doesn't have a pocket, because I'm really big into shirt pockets because I always carry pens around with me, although I usually don't have pens in my pocket while I'm doing the show. So in any event, last couple of sessions, we've been doing some stuff that is sort of all, I decided to do Galactic Cruiser Leif Erikson, and that got me thinking about the MacArthur from Mote and God's Eye, which in turn got me thinking about point-to-point star travel systems and the interesting tactical and strategic situations. And I gave the example of Michael McCollum's trilogy. And next thing you know, I'm rereading his trilogy because it was on my list of things to reread. I hadn't read it in a while. I decided to just go ahead and reread it. And it's like, I'm planning on doing a show on this eventually anyway. Why not now that it's sort of a topical thing? So that's what I'm going to do tonight, is I'm going to talk about this particular series of books. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me launch my slides. But before I do that series of books, we have to do the admin slide. So I think I'm basically around in April. The only expectation that I might not be around in April is that my sister and her wife are coming to town on the week. They arrive in town on the 18th of April, and they're going to be there for a week. And I don't know when I'm going to see them, but the 18th of April may be I suppose it's possible, because I think they're not leaving until the following weekend. It's possible the 25th may also, that one of those two dates may not happen. The 2nd of May, I'm doing something the 2nd of May. Oh, I'm having dinner with some old work colleagues, and I don't want to have to rush back because I'll be having dinner about 45 minutes away, and I don't want to rush it. And so these are people that I literally only see once a year. I expect that 9 through 23 May that I will be doing shows for those 3 weeks. On the 30th of May, I don't know. I don't see Wright having posted, but Wright told me about this thing called Wonderfest, and I'm seriously considering going to Wonderfest. And so if I do go to Wonderfest, it's the 30th and the 31st of May, in which case I will then show up at the next show with a picture of me and Rick Sternbach standing together. Maybe me and Rick Sternbach and John Eves standing together. John Eves' book is, he's got a nifty book of all the models that he's done, Star Trek-related kit bash models that he's done. And I'd really like to showcase them on the show. So Scott says, hit the thumbs up button. Yeah, hey, go ahead, hit the thumbs up button. I generally don't say, do all the YouTube things. I probably should. Please go ahead and do all the YouTube things, right? There's a few things you should do. Do all the YouTube things, like, share, talk to your friends, that sort of stuff. And the other thing that you should do is remember two things. One is that these are my opinions only and not the opinions of any of my employers. And the other thing is that you should remember that when I'm using images in this, I'm using them for educational and critique purposes. I'm not trying to steal anybody's copyright. So in the queue, I don't know what I'm going to do next after this. Well, I know what I'm going to do. Actually, that's not true. I know what I'm going to do the next couple of sessions. This is part 1 of 2. So I will do part 2 next time. Right now, on the 11th of April, I have Chris Carlson. He said that he's available. So we're going to talk about modular ship construction, specifically some new things the Danes are doing, and some of the implications that has for some of the things I've talked about in the past. Because as you all know, I'm really big into modular ship construction and modular weapons outfits, et cetera, et cetera. The Danes have, basically the people on the Baltic are the people that do all the innovation in this. We've had the Germans with the Mikos. We've had the Danes with Standflex, and now they're going to the next level, which is containerized weapons and an entire containerized weapon suite. And back in the LCS talk, when Chris Carlson did the one about turning an LCS into something that could launch, 100 harpoon missiles, containerized harpoons, by sort of pooping them out the back. That was a Danish system, and I didn't realize at the time, but that was part of a bigger proposal for a Danish system called the Cube system, where everything comes in a shipping container and they can move them around on the deck and stuff like that. And I want to take a look at that, because that's really sort of cool stuff. And then at some point, I need to get a handle on exactly where Exordium is in their reissue, because I do want to do the Exordium read along, and that will happen at some point or another. So. Okay, so here's the agenda. First, I'm going to do a little bit of follow-up on the MacArthur/Leif Erikson, because I found somebody else who's done one, and it's really kind of cool. So let's go ahead and talk about that for a little bit. And then I'm going to start the discussion about Michael McCollum's Antares Trilogy. I'll recap a little bit about why I'm talking about it and how it sort of fit in with stuff. And then I'll get into the details of publication history and ships and technology overview, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I should say, boy, I put these slides together fast, because normally what usually ends up happening is I spend a big chunk of Saturday working on the slides. And I did spend a big chunk of Saturday working on these slides, but not as big as you might think, because a couple of things happen. One is I wasn't actually finished rereading, so I had to finish rereading. 2 is I took about 4 or 5 hours off in the middle of the day to go with a friend of mine. We went and stood along the side of the road with some signs and stuff like that for a while. And so that took out a big chunk of what is normally the most productive part of my day. And then I got back and crashed a little bit after that. And then the last thing that happened is I had called a friend of mine to talk to a couple of days ago and said, hey, we haven't talked in a while, give me a call and let me know you're not dead. She's not dead. She gave me a call and we ended up talking for an hour. So I started actually putting these slides together surprisingly late. They are not the best I've ever done, but this is actually probably a pretty good show for that, because a lot of it is I'm going to give you a synopsis of what happened in the books. But I did just realize that I never put anywhere that this presentation is absolutely riddled with spoilers. Okay, the first book in this series came out literally 40 years ago. So I do not feel bad at all about going red and free on spoilers. So, but I am not going to hold back on spoilers, but just to let you know, if you're like working your way through the books and you don't want to know how it ends, then you should hit stop, go finish reading the books, and then come back and watch the rest of this episode. All right. So basically, I found this on a Facebook page. It was for some model building club or something like that. I forget exactly what it was. I was going to go back and find it, and I forgot to do that. But the guy who put this together is Mike Watson. I assume that that's him on the right, because it was his post, and he had this picture of some person who I assume is Mike Watson, and Rick Sternbach, and Rick Sternbach's painting of the MacArthur. So I showed you that the last time. So I'm pretty sure that's Watson. That's definitely Rick Sternbach. I just found it on Facebook, and I thought it was such a cool idea. I wanted to showcase it. I would have included it on the MacArthur discussion if I had thought to on the Leif Erikson one. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So here's a picture of Pournelle's original model as he had painted, and I believe it was destroyed in an earthquake, if I remember correctly. I think he said that at one point they had an earthquake and it fell off and broke or something like that. So he didn't have it later on, but I believe that's the model. In fact, I could confirm that story next time I see his son Phil, which will probably be on Monday, since his office is down the hall from mine. But that's the original model that he used that he and Larry Niven used when they were going through it. Here is Watson's model, and it's got lights on it. It uses a Duracell battery. You can see that he's added some engine in the back. But take a look at that shuttle bay. Not only did he put some big, heavy lights in the shuttle bay, but that shuttle is actually, first of all, it's modified, and second of all, it's upside down. Why would it be upside down? Well, because in the book, they talk about when the ship is rotating around, that gravity is to the outside. The centrifugal force is pushing it to the outside. And so they're actually, when they're standing in the bay, they're actually standing on the doors. Now, I can't remember if I said this or not, and I certainly meant to. I am skeptical, seriously, 100% skeptical that you can make it work, that this ship would do centrifugal force, that you could just roll it on its axis and make that work. I don't think the ship is nearly big enough to do that. I mean, I think that I just don't think I just don't think it's big enough, and it's not really designed for that. It's clearly not oriented along those ways. So from that standpoint, I guess I think it probably isn't the best thing in the world that Jerry Pournelle used that model for it. But, I appreciate the fact that he did. It's a cool model, but, I don't think it necessarily works. But it is pretty cool. There's actually, if you find the Facebook page, he's got it on a spindle, so it actually rotates. And there's a video of it actually rotating. And I just decided, every time we've tried to include video in this, we always end up with a copyright strike. So I just decided I'm not even going to go there. But you can find it. Okay, so here's a little bit more detail. As you can see, he put a second conning tower underneath. It's very obvious when it rotates. He's got this sensor cluster in the nose. He's got all these other antennas and laser turrets and things that are marked. You can see that he put a laser turret right by that shield up front. Alderson drive intake. Okay, I guess I'll press the I believe button on that. I don't remember there being an intake in the Alderson drive, but maybe it's been a while. It's been a while since I've read it. Maybe it's there. Hey, Bill. Hi. Goodbye. Just saying hi to Bill Ricker as he passes his way through. So here's some more detail. So he includes a long list of all the different places in the book where various things are referenced and why he included various things. But you can see he's got a couple of different other ships in there. He's got the Imperial Seal. He's got some other supplies and stuff that he's put in, decals for maneuvering thrusters, et cetera, et cetera. Added some hydrogen tanks and some other things, added the photon drive in terms there. So it's really pretty cool. He put a lot of effort into this, and I really kind of like what he did there. And I think, like I said, I'm not convinced that the model is the right place for Jerry to have started, but I like what this guy's done with it. And here's just the beauty shot that he has of it composited on a background and stuff like that. So that's That's kind of nice. I like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about McCollum stuff. I'm going to do a little bit of stuff. This is a slide. All these light gray slides are slides that you've seen before. But it's a point-to-point star drive situation where 2 points in space are linked by some sort of stable, permanent-ish natural wormhole phenomena that allows interstellar travel. That's exactly what's going on here. So you've got a point in space. You go to a fold point in space. You turn on your fold point drive, and you go to someplace else. You go to another star system. That's exactly how this works. Here's the overview that I put in of the trilogy from there. And so they're called fold space points. They're connected by fold space lines. That's their terminology. It all emanates from the galactic center black hole, but stars can focus them down into areas that are about the size of a planet, quote unquote. Doesn't say what planet, about the size of a planet is sort of the size that we're talking about. They're largely predictable in that you can at least have a general idea of where they are, etc. But sometimes you only know, you know where there might be one in your system. You don't know where it goes to until you jump through it. And what ends up happening in the book is they're mostly permanent, but you can have temporary ones that are caused when there's interstellar phenomena that can cause them. So in the book, when Antares went supernova, it not only wiped out a whole bunch of fold space points, but it created some new ones in some places. And then once the shock wave from the supernova went past, the temporary spots went away and some of the old ones came back. Some of them never came back, but some of them came back. And the Antares was the big monster in human space. There were 6 fold points, but as a general rule, human space is sort of spread out. I think he said it takes like 15 fold space transitions to get from one end of human space to the other. We found out in the books that Spica has 8 fold points, and it is a very compact thing. It is basically the center of the aliens empire. The STL drive is a magic photon drive. We know that they can do a rendezvous, so speed up, slow down, and they can go 20 light seconds in 2 days. Now I don't know what the error bars are on 2 days. Is that 48 hours? Is that 1 3/4 days? Don't know. Just said 2 days. But the 20 light seconds is a lot more. I'm more confident of the 20 light second number because the ships that they ended up rendezvousing with, they said, okay, what's the current delay? 20 seconds, sir. Okay, all right. So there's a bunch of implications about how you attack a system, how you design ships, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to get to that stuff, especially next week. Some of the tactical implications here means you have defenses. You can have defenses. They have fortresses. They have mines. They have all that stuff. You know where ships are coming out, so you can't sneak into a system unless you get there before the other guys get there. You can end up with specialized ships. In fact, next time I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about something they call an interceptor or a speeder. And they are dedicated ships designed to interdict in a system. Basically, you dump them in and they race to the fold points. And the idea is that they're trying to prevent other ships from escaping. They're trying to get combat power to the other fold point as quickly as they can. And they're basically giant fuel tanks and missile launchers, with some surgically enhanced crew to let them take the 10 to 15 Gs they're going to pull. So in this situation, borders can exist. You always sort of wonder in Star Trek, like, why are there borders when you can just basically go any place? And the answer is in Star Trek is that the sensors are so magically good that you can actually sort of say this is the line in space and you're not allowed to cross that line. But if the sensors weren't so good, or if you had just a point-to-point jump system, not fold point type, but I mean, if you just had a jump drive that let you go any place at pretty much unlimited range, then talking about borders doesn't make any sense at all. Everything ends up being a city-state. Everything ends up having to be a walled city-state in that situation. And that's kind of the situation when we talk about Exordium later on. That's the situation in Exordium. They all have planetary shields because they know that an enemy ship can just sort of show up, and they know that they've got planet-killing weaponry. And so the solution in the book is that they've got a planetary defense shield that they can turn on. They try to avoid doing that. It has implications for things like the the beanstalk elevator, the surface to orbit elevator, space elevator. You end up it ends up cutting it, and then you have to reconnect it later on, and that's a pain in the ass. But this is a world where borders can exist, and you have to do route planning, because if you want to go from point A to point C, you have to go through B, or maybe you can go around a long way, but it's very specific, and you can map out exactly how those connections work out. And McCollum refers to that as a fold space topology, the structure of fold space. And fold space topology ends up being a really big deal in this series. I'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so who exactly is Michael McCollum? He was a Del Rey author back in the 1990s or 1980s, and must have been 1980s. I say 90s, but I think that purge maybe happened a little bit earlier than that, because he had written the first 2 books in the series, but he never got a chance to write the 3rd one for Del Rey. It came out under his own imprint, Sci-Fi Arizona. He was an engineer at Allied Signal. He now works for Honeywell, if he's still working. He's born in 1946, so it's entirely possible he's not working anymore, but it says that he works for Honeywell. Honeywell merged with Allied Signal, and so that's how he ended up as a Honeywell employee. And so when he wrote books for fun. He didn't need the money. He wrote them for fun. And when it came time to, when the Midless Purge happened, he said, print on demand is a thing. And I've got a FedEx Kinko's nearby, and there's PDFs and stuff like that. I'm just going to create my own little print shop. And so he created his own little publishing shop called Sci-Fi Arizona. And he, like at one point when I ordered the 3rd book in the Antares Trilogy, he sent me an email and said, it'll take me about 2 days to get it in the mail to you. I plan on going to Kinko's tomorrow to print it off. Okay. And he got better at making these things over time, and now you can get it via PDF. And he had a writing series on his website that he'd periodically update. I think that stuff may be still available there, and you can also buy it all downloaded and compiled as a couple of books. But there was one on just the art of writing in general, and one on writing science fiction in particular. And he's got an Astrogator's Handbook that's pretty interesting too. He's written a lot of series. The Gibraltar Trilogy is a very nice series, and it contrasts with the Antares one. In that one, you've got jump gates that are constructs, and you also have separate FTL capability. In that one, Earth discovers that there is this huge alien empire that conquers everybody that they run into. And we know about them, but they don't know about us yet. And we would kind of like to not be conquered. And so it's all about what Earth is going to do to prevent the bad guys from conquering us. He wrote the Maker's duology. That was, I think, his 2nd and 3rd book. The first one of that duology was Life Probe, and the second one was Procyon's Promise. He's done some standalone novels also. The first one of his first published novel was A Greater Infinity, which is about multiple parallel timelines and stuff like that. And he's also the publisher of another one of my favorite series, Scott Geyer's Ganellan series. And I had been corresponding with Geyer because I really liked his stuff, and he also was purged by Del Rey. And I was really hoping that he was going to publish what at the time I think was going to be the 4th and 5th book in this series, but he actually only ended up doing 4 in that series. And I actually said, well, you know, there's this guy named Michael McCollum who's got his own website, Sci-Fi Arizona, and he publishes stuff. And so maybe you should talk to him. Here's his email address. And so I claim at least partial credit. I claim credit for the Gannon series being made available when it was made available, right? Eventually it would have gotten published by somebody. Geyer would have self-published it through Amazon himself, you know, something like that. It would have, I don't claim credit for it getting republished. I claim credit for it getting republished exactly then. So, haven't talked to McCollum in a while. I've used to exchange emails with him, but I haven't done that in about 10 years, I think. Okay, so here's the publication history. You know, first book came out in 1986. I read it then. It was really great. Second book came out in 1987. And then there was 15 years until he published the third book, Antares Victory. And so that, and I say here, for the record, I hate these images. So these are actually the images that he currently has with them. And the reason why I hate them is that isn't even remotely what any of the ships in this universe look like. We know exactly what the ships look like. I'm going to show you what the ships look like. They don't look like that. Big ships, blast ships, his equivalent of battleships, they are cylinders. In one, he describes it as being like a coffee can, which implies it's sort of squat. I'm not sure I fully believe that for reasons having to do with other things that he talks about in the show, in the books. Other ships have a ring. And so we know they don't look like this. They certainly don't look like this. This has got to be some British imprint. We have multiple spacecraft types in this. We have blast ships, which are basically battleships. He talks about heavy cruisers and light cruisers. I'm trying to remember if there were destroyers in this or not. I think I want to say there was some things that were like destroyers and frigates and stuff like that. He calls them interceptors in one point. Most of the time he actually uses the term speeders. And they're these ships that only have about 4 or 5 crew. They're in acceleration tanks the entire way. They have oxygenated fluid basically filling all their bodily cavities, including their lungs. And instead of actually breathing through that oxygenated fluid, they have a line running directly into their arteries, and their blood is oxygenated through external equipment. And because of all this stuff, it means that they can pull like 12 gravities, 15 gravities for extended periods of time, because their job is to race to a fold point and cut off any ships that are trying to escape when they've bushwhacked a system, or to get there to ambush any ships that are coming through. Because what they're trying to prevent is a ship coming into the system going, oh shit, there's an attack, and turning around and leaving and carrying the alarm. You also have orbital forts that are described as being, I think he said 1,000 meters in diameter. No, it's like maybe it was 3/4 of a kilometer in diameter, if I remember correctly. I need to go back and double check that. It might have even been less than that. It might have been 750 feet. The ships are not as big as I would expect them to be. On the few occasions when he actually does give a number, I always look at that and go like, well, that's about the size of an aircraft carrier. I kind of expected the ships to be bigger than that. Hold on just a second. You may have heard the alarm that reminded me that I hadn't taken my medicine yet. So I got to take a pill about this time every night. We also find out that modern ships are modular. There's a light cruiser involved that takes substantial damage, but it's actually fairly easy to repair because they cut away all the things that are broken. and they put new modules in. And then later, when they turn it into a ship to do as a peace envoy, they pull weapons modules out because they need to go in unarmed. And so it makes things a lot easier. And I, of course, immediately became quite excited when I saw that it was modular construction. And so that was pretty cool. Okay, so technology. Let's talk a little bit about the technology in the series. So the ships spin to create centrifugal force, centrifugal gravity. There's no artificial gravity. There's no inertial compensators. They have a photon drive, and the photon drive there's a sort of an afterburner mode where they can dump extra fuel into the exhaust and sort of get a bigger push. If they don't do that, they can get up to about 1 G of acceleration from the photon drive alone, but it's very, very efficient. They do high-speed runs where they dump a lot of fuel in there. Every now and then he mentions a little bit about fuel consumption and then doesn't seem to pay any attention to fuel consumption after that. There's lots of instances where I look at things and I go like, why did they do it that way? like that seems to be a situation that wastes a lot of fuel. Why aren't they more worried about fuel? Fuel occasionally becomes a plot point, but I don't think he's generally thinking about fuel except when he needs a plot point. So it may sound like I'm being critical of these books, and I guess I'm critiquing them, but I should point out that I absolutely love these books. They are not, they're not going to win a Nobel Prize for literature by any stretch of the imagination, but I actually really love these books. And this was like the 5th time I've read through the series, maybe the 6th. So it's a series that I keep coming back to. So I am critical, but it's critiquing with love. Fusion powered, they carry cryogenic hydrogen. They have hydrogen tankers that they use to schlep hydrogen around. The weapons are lasers and missiles and antimatter projectors. They don't really, other than mentioning that they have antimatter projectors, that's the only time antimatter is ever mentioned in this. Likewise, they've got these anti-radiation shields that let them cut through the Antares remnant. I'll get to that in a second. And they're not even mentioned in the 3rd book, I don't think, at all. Once they launch the attack, at least they're not mentioned. And anything that's an anti-radiation shield that's capable of dealing with the output of a supernova remnant, you would think would also be useful in dealing with the radiation of a nearby nuclear explosion from a missile, and might also be useful in dealing with, the photonic radiation of a laser, or maybe even antimatter projectors, the particles in a beam of antimatter. And so you would think that these anti-radiation shields would have some combat capability, but literally the only time they're ever mentioned is when they're going through the supernova remnant. And they were sort of a late thing that allowed humanity to access something that the other side assumed was not accessible. I'll get to that more. Cloud armor is something that if you're an old Traveler player, you will recognize Sandcasters. And if you are a 2300 player, you will recognize their screens in that they are ablative. It's basically ablative sand that you can dump out to diffuse and refract laser beams. Now, the cloud armor as used in the books here is more like the Sandcaster type stuff. It forms a cloud around the ship, but if the ship maneuvers, if the ship is under power, the cloud armor is not under power, and you move out of the cloud. You may recall, for those who understand 2300, and I'm going to do a show on 2300 at some point, the screens in 2300 are magnetically charged sand, and so as a result of that, they are sort of held in a field around the ship. So the ship can maneuver, and the particles will go with the ship. Also, the armor plating has built in, it's designed that when it ablates off, when it sort of vaporizes, it's got particles in it that have this prismatic effect. They're reflective. And so it's basically cloud armor is also mixed into the material of the armor on the ship. And so as it ablates away, it has the effect of diffusing lasers, et cetera. Now, outgassing in general will diffuse a laser. So if your laser beam starts chewing through something, whatever it's chewing through will outgas, and that has a tendency to diffuse it. But this is specifically designed to maximize that effect. Finally, they make a reference to large lasers and planetary defense centers, and about how planetary defense centers are almost always built near the coastline, because when the laser fires, they need lots of cooling water. And so the laser fires and there's great clouds of steam that come up from nearby as all the cooling water is vaporized and turned into steam, which I think is actually kind of cool. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the books themselves. In Antares Dawn, we discover that the colony of Alta had been cut off like 150 years previously, that a couple of a short period of time ago, they had always assumed that they got cut off because when Antares went that it was Antares going supernova that did it, right? That's the only explanation they could come up with, but they just know that their fold space point went away. And their fold space point went to a star called Napier. And then there was another star that was sort of a sister colony that came off of Napier. And then it went to Antares, and then it went to the chain back to Earth. And so this was sort of it was sort of a dead end system. They only had the one fold space point. And so, they just sort of resigned themselves to the fact that they were trapped in this one system and they couldn't get out. And they don't quite know why, but they think it's because Antares probably blew up. Because Antares is sort of an unstable star. Everybody knew that Antares was going to go supernova sometime in a relatively short time period, like say the next million years. And it ended up happening right then and there. But at the opening of the book, they know that Antares had blown up because the light has finally reached them 125, 150 light years away, and they can see it in the sky, and it's bright enough even at that distance that when it first hits, they can see it during daylight. And now it's just this very bright object in the sky at night. And they discover by accident that the fold space point is back, and they discover it because they detect a ship. It's a blast ship. When they make rendezvous with it, it turns out that it's a blast ship. It's from Earth. Everybody aboard is dead. It's clearly been in a battle and got the worst of it. And it appears to have gone through on automated. It went through the Antares supernova remnant and then went to Napier and then jumped on to Alta and was just sort of like randomly looking for a fold point. And so it's like, oh, the fold space point is back, and what the hell killed this blast ship? So they mount an expedition to go explore what's going on. And so how do they mount an expedition? Well, it turns out they've got 3 heavy cruisers, Dragon-class heavy cruisers. They're 150 years old. So I think if I remember correctly, it was 125 years, because I think the ships were like 25 years old when they got trapped in the Altan system. It was a squadron of the Earth fleet that happened to be in the system doing a goodwill visit when the fold space point went away. And so they are the main warships of the Altan Space Navy, and they are commanded by Altan forces. But they do have working fold space drives, and the codes to the fold space drive are under the control of the hereditary ambassador from Earth, one Clarence Whitlow, and his family has maintained the embassy this entire time, despite the fact they're not in contact with Earth. And so the government decides to mount an expedition to go see what's happened in human space. They classify the existence of this Terran battleship as being secret. Nobody's to mention it. And they go to Clarence Whitlow and say, we need the drive codes. And he says, I'm not going to give you the drive codes because I'm not sure that Earth's interests and Altan interests are totally in parallel right now. But what I will do is I will send my niece along and she will have the drive codes. And so they go to the Napier system. They discover in a library there, first of all, Napier is only like 12 light years away from Antares, so it gets fried. But they also discover that it's been heavily nuked. And by going down and they find an underground library where the niece, Bethany Lindquist, who's a historian by training, figures out, they managed to get the information system working again. And she's reading the reports that they had encountered an alien race and they were at war with the alien race, like as the evacuation was happening, and then they evacuated. And so they go, okay, all right, we need to go see if the other system that connects off is working. And it should have 2 fold space points. They go to the other system, they discover that they're fighting these aliens, and they eventually discover that they're cut off from Earth. And they end up defending against an alien attack, at which point everybody comes clean. The other daughter colony says, yeah, we were cut off from Earth about 12 years ago. We haven't been able to get back in contact. We've had offensives, but we can't get through. And the Altans say, yeah, it turns out Antares is transversable, and we know it because there's this Earth blast ship that came through. And so they form an alliance, and then at that point they decide that it's time to have another book. And in that book, Antares Passage, they put together an expedition to go to Earth. And along the way to Earth, because they're mapping the fold space points again, they think they know where they go, but they're not sure because the Antares supernova sort of rearranged things. And on the way to Earth, they take over a Ryle colony, and they manage to do 2 things in this Ryle colony. First of all, they capture the workers there intact. And most of the prisoners that the Sandar, the other country, the other planet, had captured, and that humans had captured, had been warriors. But in this case, they managed to capture a member of the managerial caste, who thinks different than the warriors. And Bethany Lindquist is not willing to sign up to the Sandarian belief that is inherent that these 2 species have to be at war. And so she starts talking to this manager and trying to get her point across and trying to sort of figure out how they think, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, they also capture a ship in orbit, and it goes to destroy its navigational computer, and it fails to do that because the destruct system is corroded and it does not destroy the computer, and they're able to capture a database intact. And because they've got the mining colony on the planet that has the right computers, they're able to hack it together so that the database from the ship and the mining computers allows them to access that database, and they're able to get a fold space topology chart. So now they know what the alien empire looks like, and they've never had that information before. And one of the things that they conclude is when they do that or one of the things they realize is that they control Spica, which is a nearby star that we had never found a fold space line that went to Spica. And Spica is the key star of their empire, of the aliens' empire. It has 8 fold space points, and it's sort of set up in such a way whereas human space is all strung out, and it's 15 transitions to get from one end to the other end, all roads go to Spica. There's some subsidiary things that go around some of the outside stuff, but Spica is the core And as a result, everything sort of goes through Spica. And as a result, you can get from any point in the Ryal Empire to any other point in like 6 jumps max. And so it turns out they thought, humanity always thought they were dealing with a much larger alien empire, and they're not. They're actually smaller. They just have interior lines. And they have a highly integrated economy. So they're able to take advantage of comparative advantages in terms of their production, et cetera, because they're the equivalent of a globalized economy, right? They have the equivalent of I can just have somebody in China print that for me and I'll buy it and have it shipped to the U.S. Except they're doing this on an interstellar scale. And so eventually they get to Earth and they meet with Earth folks, and Bethany and Richard Drake, the Alton commander, end up getting married, and they're a couple for the rest of the series. And they present the information to Earth and say, okay, and so we need to have an offensive to bring the to help out Sandar and help out Alta, et cetera. And the answer, the Earth initially is very skeptical, and they say, yeah, we don't think that this is going to work. We'll evacuate you. We'll evacuate you instead of fighting this. Drake sits down. Drake has an inspiration, and he decides that, you know, what we really need to do is something really, really bold. We need to take Spica. We know that Antares is transversible. They don't. We can get in through the back door. We can go through something that they think is a dead end that is not a dead end, that they think is a cul-de-sac and is not a cul-de-sac. We can get in through their back door. And if we put a big enough force and we run through the back door, we can take Spica and we can go and blockade all the fold space points and just hold the blockade and watch their economy fall apart. And once their economy falls apart, we can dictate terms. During all this time, Bethany is talking with the Ryal manager, and the Ryal manager is basically saying there's this legend of something called the Swift Eaters that used to eat their eggs, and there was like a 50,000-year battle against the Swift Eaters. The Swift Eaters are now extinct, but as a result of this, the Ryal are incredibly xenophobic. They just refuse to believe that two species could cooperate. That they could, like there's 2 of us. One of us has to kill the other one. Why don't you understand that? You stupid humans, you don't understand that one of us has to kill the other one. It's, you know, it's not your fault. We just have to do that. Okay. And so they decide that they're going to go ahead and launch this attack on Spica, and Richard Drake is going to get made the commander involved. And so the end of the second book is they're beginning to. It's clear that Ryal has started to send ships into Antares because they're wondering if maybe the supernova remnant has died down a bit. Now, what ends up happening is the ship comes into Antares, and there are humans guarding that warp point, that fold space point, and they immediately destroy the ship. But it's like, yeah, we probably need to go deal with this before it happens. And so the third book happens. And then the third book is all about the battle for Spica. It's about them taking Spica. It's about them holding Spica, while at the same time, Bethany Lindquist is trying to come up with a way to convince the Ryal to surrender. And in part because what she understands, since she starts off this book back home, she understands that there's an increasingly popular faction that is saying, like, look, why do we, the answer isn't to ask for their surrender. Why don't we just exterminate them, right? You know, when we, because that would be so much easier if we just exterminated them, and it'll be so much faster and it'll be cheaper. So once we get to the point where we can get our ships through their fold points, you know, and their defensives have fallen down because of the economic stuff. Well, once we get to that point, we should just exterminate their planets. And you know, genocide is not the thing that she wants to see happen. And so she and the Ryal prisoners go out and they convince Richard Drake to lead an expedition to try to contact the Rial and explain to them, look, the handwriting is on the wall. You understand that this is what's going to happen, that your economy is going to fall apart. And once it does, we can come and exterminate you. So you should just surrender now. And if you surrender now, we won't exterminate you. And they managed, there's a ship that had, a warship that had not flung itself into the invading fleet, because there's a handful of warships at one point. There's like 3 warships against like 50. And 2 of them charged off to their death. And the third captain, really against type, said, okay, I would be wasting the life of myself and my crew. Whereas if I hang around, I can maybe get some intel and watch what's going on in the system. And when Rial fleets come into the system to try to break through the defenses, I can at least radio them the information about where all the defensive ships are, et cetera, et cetera. I can collect intel and I can look for opportunities to pass that intel on. And so that's how Drake is able to get into the system, is he goes and he finds this ship and says, I want you to carry a message back to your leadership in the other system, because they'll blow up a human ship if a human ship jumps through the fold space point, but they won't blow up a Rial ship. So we want you to go and deliver this message saying, we want to meet with your leaders. We want to parlay. Well, we want to come to your world so that we can give you the opportunity to surrender to us. And so a lot of what happens in the third book is there's a concerted effort to break through the fold space points. There's a couple of forces get together and they dive into Spica to do a gravity trajectory maneuver. Drake takes the reserve force, and basically they have a passing battle as they come around the star. And in the process, his ship gets pretty badly hit. The flagship gets pretty badly hit. So his ship's out of action, and so he basically goes off on one of the other ships, and that's what the ship that they use to do the journey to the Rial home world to ask them for their surrender. That other ship just happens to be commanded by the heir apparent of the Sandarian throne, the son of the king of Sandar. Who is a light cruiser destroyer, and his ship is the one that had previously been badly damaged, and that's how we found out they were modular. The Rial make one last attempt to get out, and it fails, and then they go, okay, I guess we have to surrender. We have to take you at your word. And McCollum has never written more than 3 books in any series. I tried to talk him into writing a 3rd book, sequel to Life Probe and Procyon's Promise. And his comment was he wanted the makers to stay. Basically, it's a search for the people that have the faster than light travel. So that they can then take that secret back to this group known as the makers that had been sending slower than light probes out. And you find out at the end of the 2nd book in that series that the makers are the ones that have the faster than light travel. They eventually found the secret. And I tried to talk McCollum into writing a 3rd book, and he said, "Oh no, I don't want to actually meet the makers." I said, "You don't have to meet the makers, but you should." The natural thing is to go find the makers. And so have another story where it ends with the airlock opened and the maker entered the room. And then you're done. You don't have to actually meet them, right? But as it is, they haven't actually accomplished the goal. So he's never done more, like I said, he's never done more than 3 books in a series. He's got a couple of trilogies. He's got a bunch of standalones. He's got the 1-2 book series. I think this is a universe that there's a whole lot of potential there. He could do more stuff there. Okay, so this is the reason why I say that I think that when he described it as being like a coffee can, that I don't think it works like a coffee can, because this is an illustration from a version of the book that he was selling on his website, right? This is not the current cover, but it is a cover that he sold. And Antares Victory was only published through his website. So he commissioned this artwork. That is a blast ship. And we know it because we know that it's got outriggers that have weapons, and the central part will spin, but the outriggers do not spin. They've got some sort of coupling mechanism or ring or something that you can't see, and so they don't spin when the rest of it spins. And so that does not look like the shape of a coffee can to me. And so I don't know why it's described as being a coffee can. I'm also not entirely sure whether we're looking at the front of the ship or the back of the ship, because is that supposed to be a photon drive? I don't know what those egg-shaped things are supposed to be. Let's see, it looks like there's 7 of them, and I don't remember 7 being a magic number anywhere in the book. So I am just not quite sure as to what's going on with that, but that and some other descriptions lead me to believe it's not a coffee can shaped thing. Okay, so let me remove that. Let's go take a look at some comments. Let's see. Howdy, everybody. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Hey, Wright, I see that you got here late. Early on, I told people that I may not be doing a show on the weekend of May 30th because I'm contemplating going to Wonderfest. So you and I should have a conversation at some point, because I believe that you're probably going to Wonderfest. And so maybe I'll even decide that tomorrow. Yeah, so I think I had the number wrong. I think it was like 125 years, but yeah, that's exactly what that means. It took a while to get. One Horse Chase specifically says that would mean that supernova happened 150 years previously if they're just seeing the light. That is exactly what happened. So in fact, one of the things is that when they take the heavy cruiser to Earth, Earth goes, that's a Dragon class heavy cruiser, isn't it? They said, yeah, there were 3 of them that got stuck in the system. It's like, that ship has got to be 120 some years old. No, it's 150 years old. And they just worked really hard to keep it in good shape. And it actually goes, and those ships participate in the attack. I'm kind of wonder, they must have been upgraded or something like that. But yeah, so there's one thing that McCollum is very good about is he does understand light speed delays and stuff like that. And so this is a big deal. Antares goes supernova. When it went supernova, some fold space points went away, some fold space points moved, some temporary fold space points were created. When the shock wave gets by a fold space point, some of the ones that went away come back, but not all of them. There are some new fold space points that don't go away, and some of the ones that were temporary go away. But the 2 empires, the Human Empire and the Ryal Empire, had not had any mutually connected stuff until those temporary ones were created, and also in the case of the Napier system, and also some permanent ones were created that are now intersection points. And that's how they're able to fight each other, is through these particular intersection points. And unfortunately, like I said, human space is sort of long and strung out. Some of those intersection points have the possibility of like breaking human space into pieces, and that would be bad. And so that's why they're really, really seriously concerned about all that stuff. And it's hard for them to coordinate when in cases where, you know, there are systems that they lost that they'd like they couldn't coordinate between Sandar and Earth because they lost the connecting system. So Sandar was on their own. So a blast ship, Scott asked, what's a blast ship? It's a battleship. It's just his term for a battleship. So Patrick Ross points out, see that structure surrounded by steam? Basically, the sensors are good enough in the system that once that thing is fired, even without the steam, you know you've got a pretty good idea where it is, and you can spot stuff from orbit. Right? You look around the coast. It's like, oh, that thing looks like a big laser mirror. At one point, they talk about, do they have battle mirrors in orbit? And that's the only reference you ever hear to that. There's a few things like he doesn't mention the anti-radiation shields at all in a combat context, and I can't even remember if he uses them in the third book at all. He must have used them at the very beginning of the third book when they're transferring through Antares. But other than that, it just seems obvious that you would use them all the time. Good evening, Delon. Let's see. Patrick Ross says, so in the third book, they'd meet their maker. Not their makers, the makers of the life probe, the life probe that the first book is named after. Yeah, that's exactly what I think they should do in that. And let's see, Wright says he has a room. I need to get a room too. I'm talking with a friend of mine about whether he wants to come down too. So it's part of my lifelong goal for all my friends to meet all my other friends. So let's see. And hello, Dustin. How are you? Okay, so I think that that's about it for this evening. Next show, actually, you know what? I had one more slide. Next time, I'm going to do a deep dive into fold space topology and the combat implications of that in this universe. I'll put up what little bit of a map we have. We don't have a full map. The tactics involved in all of this, because one of the things that differentiates Spica from Antares, for instance, is Spica, because of how Spica is set up, the fold space points in the system are actually relatively close to each other, which makes it easier for the blockading forces to do mutual support. Antares fold space points were all spread out. And it was a couple of days or, like a week or two to get from any one to any other one. In Spica, they're very close to each other. Talk a little bit about strategy, talk a little bit about doctrine, and what I would change in particular. The way those speeders work, a bunch of them jump into the system. They look around. One of them jumps back and reports while the other, 10 of them jump into the system. 9 of them go spewing off places. One of them jumps back, and then it does a jump back to the system, and it goes running off to wherever it's going to run to the fold space points. First of all, wouldn't it be easier if you had a carrier of some sort so they could do it as one jump and not have to worry about dispersal or anything else? They all end up together, and they can fly in formation if they need to, as opposed to being spread out. And that carrier would function as sort of the sensor node at the fold space point and deploy a big array and give them information, pass information onto the ships the speeders that are heading out. And it would also have a little shuttle or something like that, a small craft that would jump back and say, oh, by the way, we launched, here's the targets we saw, blah, 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 blah. Instead of having a speeder jump back and do it. I mean, it strikes me that there are limited resources. I'd also like to I'm going to make the argument that battle riders make a lot of sense in this universe in a way that they don't in Traveler. In Traveler, the big argument was always like, yeah, but if I leave my jump drive behind and I have to run, what do I do? Because I can't jump out of system, and so they hunt me down like a dog. Okay, but if I have to be in a fold space point to jump anyway, and so I have to go to the fold space point I want to go to jump. There's no reason why I can't have my jump engine there. And all the argument in terms of saving mass, et cetera, can be there. And you can also use this thing as a refueling tanker, right? Maybe it just hangs out and it refuels ships that come through until it runs out of fuel or something. So I'm going to do some exploration of various ways that you could do that, how the doctrine would work, et cetera, because I think I'm all liquored up on the idea that this is the place where something like a battle rider really makes sense in a way that it doesn't in Traveler. And so that's what we're going to talk about next time. So with that in mind, Lissa is here behind the scenes. So everybody wave to Lissa. And with that in mind, I think we're going to go ahead and call it for this evening. And it's an hour-long show. We almost did it in that hour. Probably could have done it in an hour if I would have rushed a little bit. Lissa looks skeptical. Lissa looks. I can see her little picture here. She looks skeptical. So
look. I've been here long enough. I know how this works.
Yeah. So with that in mind, everybody. So thank you very much once again. I say this every week because it's true every week. We've got currently have 18 people watching, and I'm always surprised at how many people we have watching live on a Saturday night. I am honored that a bunch of people that don't have a life either decide that they want to not have a life with me. So thank you very much for that. And I look forward to doing it again next time, and I'll keep doing it as long as you guys keep showing up. So with that in mind, everybody, thank you very much, and see you next week.